Hi everyone. So this video lecture is going to just briefly hit on some points that I want to clarify from the appendix about writing about stories. And this relates to your midterm paper. So a couple points that I just want to emphasize are that really what you're doing when you're writing an analysis paper is you're clarifying your relationship to what you've read, which is a bit abstract, but essentially it's going to be what you're going to be writing is going to be based in research and analysis and criticism, but it's very much based on your own interpretation to a story. It's sort of taking your emotional response, your emotional interpretation, and then quantifying that with substantiated evidence. Is really what you're doing. So this is going to begin in a very personal, reactionary, opinionated place, and then you're going to substantiate that. There was a good quote, it's the measure of what you brought to the reading. So that being said, there really isn't the only way to have a wrong answer in a literary analysis paper is to not substantiate your evidence correctly, or to use your evidence in the wrong way, or to just purely be opinionated and emotional without evidence. It's based in exposition, which is served to clarify, set forth, and explain in detail. So you have this reaction, you have this interpretation to a story, and then you are going to explain how you got there. So there's going to be some exposition, some explaining. There's going to be some research and argumentation. All of those parts are going to come together in a unified whole. So it's based on the premise of clarifying your ideas. So this is all going to help you form your thesis for a literary analysis paper. Most likely it's going to focus on a few aspects. There's going to be a few key things that you got out of the reading, out of the story, or that you find are important or revealing, or that you think must be discussed. A few key elements that influence your personal, emotional, reactionary interpretation. You will then use these elements and the critical perspectives that we've discussed to substantiate your argument. So there's a few really simple ways to go about doing this. Read the story again, take notes, focus on what jumps out at you, what you think influences your interpretation, and this will help you find a pattern that's significant. This will obviously all add in developing your thesis. To write critically about short fiction, you must think critically about it. I believe we're all doing that already. Now it's just the next step is to take those thoughts and put them into words that make sense to a reader. So, best approaches to conceptualizing a thesis in a literary paper. One of the upcoming video lectures is going to elaborate on this a little bit more, but it states the central idea, obviously. It states the central argument that is important to understand is that in this point in your college career, I'm sure you've written research papers that are purely informational. You're just dumping information onto a piece of paper for the reader. But then there's also argumentative writing, which I'm sure you've also done. This is going to have both components. Most research papers, most good research papers do have both components. You are making an argument. It's not necessarily an argument or a type of argument that you may have done before. Your argument is your response to the story, your interpretation. So it may be easier for you to conceptualize this paper in that way. Think back to like English 100, where you are, or any class where you say you're picking a side on a current topic or something like that, and then you use your research to substantiate that. You're doing the same thing here, it's just your argument is coming from a much more personal place. Obviously, your thesis and your argument should be easy for the reader to recognize and understand. And it will be most effective if it expresses a specific idea you want to develop about a story you want to write about. So I'm giving you immense creative control over this paper where really you just have a few guidelines. What story you pick, how you approach it, your own personal interpretation, all of this is very personal to you. Also make sure that you go to Purdue OWL. That's in this week's modules as well. There's a lot of really great resources at Purdue OWL. All right, I'm just going to go through this next part really quickly. This was in the reading, but it's important to understand, these different types of literary papers, not so much that, all right, so there's these different type of literary papers. Your midterm, your literary analysis papers is going to use possibly all of these components, and that's what's important to know. So explication is derived from the Latin word meaning unfolding. It means to unfold the meaning of the text. You are explaining, you're unpacking, you are interpreting passages, you're using a lot of quotes. Your paper should definitely have a lot of explication in it, and it should definitely have a lot of analysis in it, which is the process of separating parts and elements in an effort to fully understand the whole. We do this in class all the time. You do this for your STQ squared. We do this in our discussions. You're hopefully getting pretty used to analysis. The important thing to think about, though, is that there is a Gestalt view and an anti-Gestalt view when it comes to analysis. So the sum of the parts are greater than the whole, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So you need to decide sort of which method that you are approaching. The story as a whole may not work very well in your opinion, but there may be some really great parts and really great elements that are crucially important, that are worth knowing and discussing and analyzing and understanding and appreciating, even if the story's not that good. Or it could be the opposite, where you have this really positive response to a story, but when you start to deconstruct some of the elements, some of the parts, you realize that the parts themselves may not be that extraordinary, but somehow they come together and result in something that you find special. And then lastly, comparison and contrast. You've done this probably since elementary schools. There's a good example on page 1084 in the textbook. You may be using some comparison and contrasting in your midterm literary analysis paper. You might not be, but it's so important to know. All right, that is it for this lecture.